Eternia, the home planet of the Masters of the Universe, a world much like our own, made up of diverse environmental conditions, ranging from snow-covered tundras to volcanic mountains. But somewhere in between these desolate extremes, populated by sword-wielding barbarians, are the forests and jungles brimming with life, gently brushed with the soft, fuzzy vegetation known as moss. And the master of this green universe is the equally soft, fuzzy, gentle creature known to longtime fans as Mossman.
Well, glad to know you.
In a world filled with colorful characters who spring into action without hesitation, wildly swinging their weapons in an effort to conquer or protect the people of Eternia, Mossman was an anomaly. In the original He-Man and the Masters of the Universe cartoon by Filmation, Mossman was actually never shown to perform any acts that could be considered violent. Aside from appearing as a background character with no lines, Mossman only had a speaking role in 2 episodes, Here, There, Skeletor's Everywhere, and The Ancient Mirror of Avathar. He's a napper, not a fighter, and was shown as constantly sleeping and yawning.
Good you made it. I got tired of waiting and took a nap.
He also appeared highly empathic and considerate of those around him, offering to sleep somewhere else,
I'll go find another spot.
or apologizing for making people yawn.
Excuse me. Oh, please excuse me. Excuse me.
And so polite too. Always happy to lend a hand.
Glad I could help. Be happy to.
And self-sacrificing as well.
Don't worry about me. Save yourself.
The great thing about Mossman was that he wasn't just a typical mortal character. He was more of an elemental, and wasn't somebody He-Man had to worry about rescuing. He could take care of himself while He-Man took care of business. When Skeletor's forces infiltrated the Eternian Palace, rather than fighting off the invaders, Mossman called He-Man for help, then went back into hiding.
You better get back here right away. We're in big trouble. Hurry, please, hurry.
It's interesting that in a cast of characters so famous for smashing and bashing each other, Mossman was never portrayed as doing anything that could be considered harmful to another living creature. As a matter of fact, in one scene where he helps Prince Adam restrain Trapjaw into a cage, the shot cuts away so that we don't see Mossy pushing Trapjaw around.
Thanks, Mossman.
I can't help but think this was Lou Scheimer's call, who was always conscious about delivering a positive message to children in his shows. Mossman isn't just a character covered with vegetation, he is vegetation, the personification of plant life, which gives us life. Mossman is life. I have a feeling Mr. Scheimer thought it wouldn't be right for the personification of life to harm other life, no matter how dastardly it was. And so Mossman served more as a helper than a fighter in the Filmation series. Despite never getting physical in the series, like other Masters of the Universe, Mossman had his own superpowers. He was able to communicate with plant life and gain valuable information.
Wow, that's a long time. Really? There is? Wait, the moss says it might be a trap.
And was also able to persuade plants to physically help out as well.
Good day, my friends. Would you mind leaving the wall so we might see it?
What I liked about Mossman's relationship with other plant life was that he regarded all of it as his family, a piece of himself.
Now for some help from my seaweed cousins. Watch!
The show didn't try to get too existential, but I did appreciate this unique view on this particular character, and the gumption it must have taken to have an action figure produced by a profit-driven corporation that didn't actually take part in any action. Being a plant himself, one of Mossman's other powers was the ability to shapeshift, stretching out over long distances in the form of vines.
I know. A clean fine. That's how I'll get out.
Which also came in handy for traveling through cramped quarters. Being a pacifist, camouflage was also another one of his key powers, blending in with his mossy surroundings, or taking on the form of any other kind of vegetation that may be near. But without a doubt, his most impressive power was putting up with this asshole.
I think I know a little more about old things than a patch of fungus.
That's not very nice.
I mean, seriously, who could hate a guy covered in moss? He did eventually warm up to Mossy in the end, though. Okay, that wasn't his most impressive power. That would be his pine scent. Still faintly there after all these years. And let's talk about the classic figure. It was released in the 4th series of the original Masters of the Universe line in 1985. He was a recolor of Beastman, but rather than just having a new color scheme, he was flocked like Panther. Flocking is the technique of adding small fibers onto something to add texture, and this effect gives Mossman his genuine mossy look. Although it's been over 30 years, the flocking on many of these figures still looks great despite the battles many of them have been in. Much to the dismay of Filmation. He's got the same articulation as most Masters figures, arm, head, and leg, and he has the standard Masters waist spring, for when politeness doesn't work. He came with a weapon, a recolored club from Clawful, who was released the year before, this time in brown. As a pacifist, though, a plain old twig looks more fitting for the vintage Mossy. In 2002, the Masters of the Universe line was relaunched, and the following year, an online exclusive figure was offered with the purchase of 3 Masters figures.
Most folks call me Mossman.
Just as the original figure was a green flocked version of Beastman, this 2003 version is a green flocked version of the 2002 Beastman. I don't think this works as well as the original reuse, though. The original Beastman didn't look much different from the other Masters, heroes, and villains, and his face wasn't overly vicious looking. So it worked on the original Mossman. The 2002 Beastman looks too, well, beastly, to be able to double as a Mossman figure as well. The body looks monstrous, and the flocking doesn't conceal the feral-looking face much. Moss Beast would have been a more fitting name for this incarnation. The 2000X series, as they're known, featured more articulation than the original figures, which caused problems for a flocked figure like Mossman. With the added shoulder and hip articulation, those areas had to be left unflocked on this figure because they'd just get worn off with movement, which leaves these areas just plain green plastic. Since he doesn't have knee or ankle articulation, and has flat feet, the extra movement in the hips don't add much to the figure. There's only one way he can stand, but at least he can stand, which most original Masters of the Universe figures can't say. The waist spring on mine appears to be broken.
Wrong again.
Oh, you're right, Mossy. They didn't even include the waist spring. I guess the flocking would have interfered with it. And for head articulation, just like the original figure, he can look left and right. Since this Mossman is ready to crack skulls, he comes with a club, a brown recolor of 2000X Mechanex weapon. He may not have his waist spring, but he's still got a play feature, a button on his back which activates a double arm smashing motion. This button will probably drive adults with obsessive-compulsive disorder crazy, but most kids probably won't care, or the child that still lives in the heart of an adult. The problem, though, is that the weight of the arms combined with the club is too much. The feature barely works unless you lose the club. Then he can raise his mossy arms in the air like he just don't care. And it's a great feature if you have a lot of leaves to clean up on your lawn, and is also handy for cleaning up fallen twigs.
Tending a garden takes patience.
More than I have. The flocking is wonderful on this figure, but for me it's basically another Nika Staction figure. He's got basically one pose he can hold, and he's pretty much only good for just sitting on a shelf as a display piece. Even lightly handling him makes the flocking come off. And no pine scent either, so break out the pine sol if you want this guy to smell like the vintage Mossman.
Good idea.
Unlike the passive, gentle Mossman in the original series, this Mossman was perfectly comfortable fighting, although he was sure to issue stern warnings before taking action.
I'm warning you. Make one move and I trim your hedge.
He still retained the ability to shapeshift, but it was mostly used for explosive attacks. Even a defense could be turned into an attack with this version of Mossman. I wonder what Lou Scheimer thought of this reimagining of Mossman. I can't help but think his reaction would have been,
Don't like this at all.
They did try to give the character some passive and gentle traits despite all the fisticuffs though. He created flowers wherever he stepped, and he had a soothing southern drawl.
Heard a commotion. Figured I could offer a little help.
The series took the elemental aspect to the extreme by having Mossman on the same level as a powerful wizard or mystic, able to create tidal waves of vegetation. An okay figure, but definitely not as awesome as the next incarnation of the Mossy one.
You're going back to the root cellar.
The third version of this figure was released in 2010 under the Masters of the Universe Classics line, and is, in my opinion, the definitive version of this character. No, I mean it. The third time's definitely the charm. As an homage to the original figure being a recolor of Beastman, this Mossman comes with two heads, a green flocked version of the classic's Beastman head, and another modeled after his 2000X appearance. As with the 2000X figure, this classic's Beastman head looks too vicious for such a fuzzy bugger, so I think the more passive yet stern looking 2000X head looks more fitting.
Looks a lot better now, doesn't it?
Sure does. There were two versions of the 2000X head, one with flocked ears and one without. Like the original figure, this one comes with a brown recolor of Classic's Clawfuls Club. He also comes with his cool little shoulder pouch. One of the basic rules of art is to have colors flow throughout a piece, and this pouch makes the brown of the club and loincloth flow throughout the figure, creating color harmony. This figure has even more articulation than the 2000X version, so it's also got the same problem with joints that couldn't be flocked, but it's not as noticeable this time. I think they just decided to flock everything, and it's up to you if you want to put him in an elaborate pose that will wear off the flocking.
You might want to rethink that.
And like the original figure, this Mossman is once again pine-scented. And here's 3 generations of Mossman together.
Could use a little water.
I'm slippery enough as it is.
The original Masters figures were all so similar. Yeah, different heads, armor, and weapons, but almost all of the bodies were the same. Mossman truly stood out from all the repaints. He was one of the few figures with a different texture and smell.
You're working on the wrong end.
Not that smell. Flocking can't be cheap, and so it's cool that Mattel recognized what an important part of the character it is, and has continued with the technique with subsequent figures, since poor old Panther didn't get the flocking treatment for his Classics incarnation. Whether it's as a pacifist narcoleptic, or an ass-kicking mulch machine. Mossman is sure to add a bloom to your Masters of the Universe collection.
Glad to help.
Be sure to visit He-Man.org if you're a fan of all things Eternian. All sorts of great information about the cartoons and toys there, as well as a great discussion forum with wonderful people who took many of Mr. Scheimer's inspiring and empowering life lessons to heart. Share crop the video if you liked it, leave a comment below, and to prune the tribe, hit subscribe.
Nerd mistake.